Hello, welcome to the Finance After 50 family. Here's a number that surprises almost everyone the first time they see it. The average Social Security check in 2026 is around $2,070 a month. That's about $25,000 a year. And the average retiree spends closer to $50,000 or $60,000. Sit with that gap for a second. Because that gap, the space between what arrives automatically every month and what your life actually costs, that gap has a name. Most people never give it one. They just feel it as stress, as a tightening in their chest every time a bill arrives close to the end of the month. Today, I want to give that gap a name. And more importantly, I want to show you how to close it, or at least see it clearly enough to plan around it. Because the wealthiest retirees usually don't think about money in terms of percentages or budgets. They think about it in terms of one question. Does my guaranteed income cover what I actually need to survive? If the answer is yes, everything else in your finances becomes optional, flexible, even fun. If the answer is no, that's not a failure. That's just information. And once you have it, you can act on it. The people who struggle most in retirement aren't always the ones with the least money. Often, they're the ones who don't know one simple number. Today, we're going to find that number. 3 numbers. Number nobody compares. Picture your kitchen table. On one side, your Social Security statement, that number you know by heart. On the other side, a stack of bills, the mortgage, the electric bill, the prescription receipts. Here's something strange. Most people have looked at both piles many times, but almost nobody has ever put them next to each other on the same piece of paper at the same time and done the subtraction. And here's why that matters. Because when those two numbers live in separate parts of your mind, your brain does something unhelpful. It blends them. It assumes things probably balance out, roughly, most months. And roughly, most months is exactly the kind of thinking that leads to a slow drain on savings that nobody notices until the savings are much smaller than expected. This isn't about being bad with money. People who've managed households for 40 or 50 years are usually quite good with money. It's just that nobody ever asked them to do this one specific comparison. Guaranteed income, side by side, with essential costs. And then write down the actual difference. So that's what we're doing today. Chapter 2. What counts as your floor? Let's start with the first number, what I call your income floor. Your floor is any money that arrives every single month, regardless of what the stock market does, regardless of what happens in the economy, regardless of anything. For most people, that's Social Security. For some, it also includes a pension. Increasingly rare, but still out there for many retirees, especially those who worked in government, education, or certain unionized industries. For some, it includes income from an annuity, a financial product specifically designed to convert a lump sum into guaranteed monthly payments. Here's why this category matters so much. This is the only money in your entire financial picture that you cannot outlive. And that doesn't go down when markets go down. Everything else, savings, investments, retirement accounts, can fluctuate. They can grow. They can shrink. Your floor doesn't do either. It's just there, every month, like clockwork. So step 1 is simple. Add up everything that falls into this category. Social Security, pension, if you have one. Annuity income, if you have one. That total is your floor. Write it down. We're going to compare it to something in a moment. And that comparison is where this gets interesting. Because for many people, the next number is larger than expected. And that's where things get interesting. Chapter 3. What counts as essential? Now here's where most people's instincts lead them astray. Not because they're wrong, but because essential gets blurry over a lifetime of just living. When I say essential, I mean the costs that exist regardless of what kind of retirement you're having. The lights on, roof overhead, food on the table costs. Housing, whether that's a mortgage, rent, or property taxes and maintenance if the home is paid off. Utilities, groceries, not restaurants, groceries. Healthcare costs that recur every month. Insurance premiums, regular prescriptions. Transportation, whatever it actually costs you to get around, even if that's just gas and insurance on one car, and any debt payments that are non-negotiable. Here's the test I'd encourage you to use for anything you're unsure about. If you genuinely couldn't function without it for more than a week or 2, it's essential. If you could go without it for a month and just feel a bit deprived, that's a different category. And we're not including it here. This isn't about judgment. Travel, hobbies, gifts for grandchildren. All of that matters. And all of that has its place. But it has a different place than this number. Add up your essential monthly costs. Write that number down too. Now you have two numbers sitting side by side. Your floor and your essentials. Chapter 4, The Gap. Here's where it gets real. Subtract your essentials from your floor. For some people, that number comes out positive. Your guaranteed income actually covers more than your basic survival costs, which means everything else you have is genuinely flexible. That's a different kind of retirement than most people picture. And if this is you, I want you to actually notice that. Because a lot of people in this position still live like the number is negative, out of habit or worry. For a lot of people, though, that number comes out negative. And here's the thing about that. It's not a surprise to anyone who's been paying attention to their bank account. What's different is seeing it as one number, with a name, instead of a vague feeling of things are tight. Because once it has a name, my floor falls $400 short of my essentials every month. It becomes something you can actually work with. A negative gap doesn't mean retirement isn't working. It means you've identified exactly how much your other resources need to bridge every single month, indefinitely. And that's a completely different planning question then. I hope my savings last. I need $400 a month for my other resources. That's a number you can plan around. I hope things work out. That's not. So before we go further, I want to pause on something. If your gap came out negative just now, here's a thought that might be sitting with you. Where is this extra money supposed to come from? We've actually already covered two pieces of this puzzle in previous videos. Medicare savings programs that can lower your healthcare costs, and property tax exemptions that can lower what's sitting in your essentials column. If you haven't watched those yet, they're worth a look. They directly shrink one side of the equation we're building today. But there's a third piece. What happens to this exact calculation when one spouse passes away? That one I haven't covered yet. I'll come back to it. For now, let's keep building. Because understanding why the gap moves over time is just as important as the gap itself. Chapter 5. Why this number changes over time. Here's something important that catches people off guard a few years into retirement. Your floor does adjust for inflation. Social Security has a cost of living adjustment most years. But here's the catch. The costs that matter most to retirees, healthcare in particular, have often grown faster. So even if your floor goes up every year, your essentials may be going up slightly faster. This means the gap we just calculated isn't necessarily fixed. For many people, it slowly widens over time. Not dramatically, but steadily, year after year. This isn't meant to be alarming. It's meant to be useful. Because if you know your gap tends to widen by a small amount each year, you can build that into your planning, rather than being surprised by it 5 or 10 years from now. Knowing the direction something is moving is often more useful than knowing the exact number today. That's the real benefit of this exercise. Not perfection, confidence. Because uncertainty is often more stressful than knowing exactly where you stand. Chapter 6. What to do with your gap. So you've got your number. Maybe it's positive. Maybe it's negative. Either way, now what? If your gap is positive, your main task is making sure the rest of your money is positioned for what you actually want it to do. Growth, legacy for family, travel, supporting causes you care about. The pressure is off the will I be okay question, which frees up a lot of mental energy for the what do I actually want question. If your gap is negative, there are really only a few categories of response. You can look at whether your essentials have room to shrink, not through deprivation, but through the kind of review we discussed in earlier videos. You can look at whether your floor itself has room to grow, or you can plan for your other resources to cover the gap deliberately, with a specific monthly amount in mind, rather than just drawing down vaguely and hoping it lasts. None of these are quick fixes, but all of them are things you can actually do something about, once you know the number. And before we finish, there's one important mistake people make after calculating this number for the first time. Chapter 7, The Warning. Now that you have a real number, your gap, I need to tell you something important, because that number is valuable to more than just you. Once you start thinking in terms of, I need X dollars a month to cover my gap, you become a very specific kind of target for certain financial products, particularly some types of annuities or income products that promise to guarantee covering that exact gap, often with high fees or long lockup periods buried in the fine print. I'm not saying all such products are bad. Some genuinely do what they say. But here's the rule of thumb. The more urgently something is being sold to you as the solution to a number you just calculated, the more carefully you should read the fine print. Ideally with a second set of eyes. A fee-only financial advisor. A trusted family member who's good with numbers. Or both. This is information that helps you ask better questions. It's not, by itself, a product to buy. Chapter 8. Your Action Plan. Here's where we land. This week, I want you to do 3 things. First, write down your floor. Every source of guaranteed monthly income added together. Second, write down your essentials. Using the test from earlier. Could you not function without it for more than a week or 2? Third, subtract. And write down the result. Whatever it is. That's it. 3 numbers. 1 piece of paper. It may seem simple, but simple is powerful. Because once a problem has a name and a size, it becomes something you can actually plan for. Most people have never done this. Not because it's hard, but because nobody ever framed it as one simple comparison before. And once you have that number, every other financial decision gets easier. Because you're no longer guessing at the size of the problem. You're working with an actual number. Now, everything we talked about today focused on the income side of this equation. But there's a flip side that almost nobody plans for properly. What happens when one spouse passes away and that household's income floor changes overnight? Sometimes dramatically. This is one of the most financially destabilizing moments in retirement. And it's also one of the most predictable, which means it's one of the most plannable, if you know what to look for in advance. In the next video, I want to walk through exactly what changes, what to check now while both of you are here to plan together, and the conversations that are uncomfortable but make all the difference later.